Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for joining a conversation with a man who is leaving public office in end of November into December. But we want to talk, Mr. President, thank you for coming, first of all, about some of the themes of this Clinton Initiative meeting, which is a cooperation between NGOs and government and the private sector, and also the conversation between leaders, what you learn from each other. You headed up the G20. What was that experience for you as an opportunity to engage others in focusing on big global problems?
Let me start remembering the meeting we had in France in November 2011. It was a very disappointing one. We finished that without agreements and even without a sense of direction. So the problems seemed not only serious but also out of control. And then we started a process when Mexico took over the head of the G20. We started multiple processes in the sense that we're beginning several ministerial meetings in order to put in a common place the different positions and try to close the gap between them. And at the same time, we started to include several expressions of civil society. We talked with the unions, with their organizations, we talked with youth people, we talked with the private sector, we organized several meetings with the so-called V20. And finally, we reached the G20 meeting in Los Cabos last June. And we focused in three main areas. First, the strategies for short term, in particular the economic crisis in Europe, the long-term economic problems, and then we developed the action plan of Los Cabos for growth and jobs. And third, all the problems, but very important problems, which is food security, financial inclusion, and green growth and environmental issues. And all those topics, we included the opinions and expression of private sector, civil society, NGOs, and probably by first time in the G20, under my experience, it was a very, very important input for the outcome of the G20. So it was a good experience, and I strongly recommend to follow up the commitment coming from this open dialogue we organized.
When there are meetings like this, what do leaders learn from leaders? What's the conversation that makes a difference?
It is difficult because I remember that these kind of meetings became too formal, because you assume that everybody is going to talk about in a very spontaneous manner. However, all the leaders come with a very written speech, and it is impossible to be spontaneous like that. But let me tell you, we organize like 2 or 3 special moments. For instance, the dinner, the first day, lunch, the day after. And I remember when I visited the new convention center in Los Cabos we built for this purpose. And I saw the table for lunch and dinner. And it was a very big table, like it's very common in this kind of events. And I say, no, it isn't going to work. So we need a closer and smaller table.
More intimate.
So we were almost few centimeters each other, and we started to talk spontaneously. So we have very important discussions about Europe in the dinner, and very important discussions about trade the day after. And actually we fixed some of the disagreements in the lunch, having a quite important discussion between Brazil and Argentina, 2 countries that were pushing for more barriers and more tariffs on trade, and the rest of the members of the G20. And finally we reached an agreement in order to establish a new expression against protectionism. So we learn a lot in terms that we can learn more, or we can do even more from our spontaneous expression than our formal written speeches. That
So when you're having these conversations, do you say, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, or do you say Barack?
Depending on
How well
very
you know?
close manner. Well, talking in a dual conversation, I say Barack,
Okay.
and he say Felipe, and talking a very formal table like that, we say Mr. President or the President of the United States. Say, it's quite interesting and funny.
Let's look at Mexico. Mexico's economy is doing how well now or how bad?
Well, doing well, you're right. I received today the reports of July, and again, the economic growth was bigger than expected, 4.7 for July.
We take that here.
That's good, it will be great. Well, let me tell you, we suffered a lot in the economic recession, 2009.
Right.
However, Mexican economy expanded almost 16% since the second semester of 2009. So we have like 13 quarters in a row growing and generating like 700,000 new jobs in the formal sector annually, which is very good for Mexico. And I think that finally the economy is becoming very, very competitive. Let me give you a couple of examples. When I took office 6 years ago, Mexico was the 9th largest exporter of vehicles in the world. And today we are the 4th largest exporter of vehicles in the world. So we are, for instance, the first exporter of flat screen and smart mobile phones. And it's becoming a very, very good economy. And it's not only that we are very close to the United States, which is clearly an advantage, but also we are investing a lot in infrastructure and in a very important thing, Charlie, which is human capital. We have built in this 6 year 140 new universities from greenfield, public and free tuition universities. And with that, there are like 113,000 new engineers graduating every year in Mexico. So today there are more engineers every year than in Germany or UK or Canada or Brazil. And with that, a lot of companies, American and abroad, global companies, are realizing that Mexico is very, very competitive in manufacturing, for instance, even vis-a-vis China, for instance.
The thing we read about are two big issues. One is narco-terrorism. What's it going to take to win that battle? The second is immigration.
Well, first, a lot of courage.
Courage.
Yes, courage, because otherwise it is impossible to deal with that. And you need to have the principles that no one nation could prosper without rule of law. Because that is exactly our main focus, in the sense that we are not prosecuting drugs by drugs themselves. We are looking for rule of law in Mexico. We want a country in which the law prevail. Otherwise, it will be impossible to prosper or to have a fair society. So in that sense, second, you need a comprehensive strategy. And our strategy has 3 fields. One is, of course, fighting the criminals, and we are doing so hardly. Second, and more important, you need to rebuild and reinforce your law enforcement agencies, and in that sense, we are creating an absolutely new federal police, and we are establishing new processes. For instance, we are vetting any single new member of the police corps at federal level, and vetting all the members of the police corps already in place, because we have a more reliable. And third, you need to rebuild social fabric. And finally, and probably, well, the most important thing that it is needed to do is, in our case, you need to stop the incredible amount of money flying every single year towards the hands of the criminals.
And that's the reason they can achieve the level of corruption that they're able to achieve, because they've got so much money.
Indeed. But it's not only a question of money. Yes, it's very important. But you need reliable people. So in that sense, you need to pay much more to the policemen, but also you need people who believe in principles and believe in the country. And the corruption, it's another very important topic. Why? Because unfortunately, in the old political system or in the old system in the Mexican society, corruption was some kind of a way to do things.
Yes, a way of doing business.
But one thing is that you are in the street, or anyone, and bribe a policeman in the corner. And other, for me it's the same, it's bad in any case, but other question is when the corruption, or through the corruption, organized crime and cartels touch the police corps. And then they took over the hands of the society to protect themselves from the criminals. That's the problem. So that's the reason why we are in a process to rebuild the law enforcement institutions, to clean up the police corps, to put in jail, or at least in the street, the people involved with criminals and so on.
And America doesn't help the problem because of the demand from the United States, as well as the fact that guns are flowing from the United States into Mexico.
A lot of factors. Well, one is part of a problem, or the big part of our problem is that we are living in a neighborhood in which the largest consumer of drugs in the world is our neighbor.
To the north.
Yeah. And all those guys want to sell him drugs through my window, through my door. And the second is the weapon. Yeah. Exactly. You know, we have seized in my government 150,000 guns and weapons. And 85% of that were sold in a gun shop in the American side.
How would you grade yourself on your success on this battle as you leave office? Is it a disappointment?
Of course, the problem is a long-term battle, in the sense that you need to switch the reality of the whole society probably. But I can measure in this way. When I took office, there were like two twin processes. One is that the weakening of the law enforcement agencies, mainly due to the corruption, and on the other side, the empowering of the criminal organizations. So after this year, I can see the same processes, but in the other way around. I can see the empowering and the strengthening of the capacities of the law enforcement agencies, new federal police with the state-of-the-art technology and reliable people, and at the same time, decreasing or weakening process of the organized crime. We have put in jail or they die like 23 out of the 37 most wanted criminals in Mexico. So from 2009 to 2012.
Immigration. Give us some free advice as to what would be the best immigration reform in the United States, in your judgment, because you have this very long border.
Well, first, one fact which is very important, Charlie. According to the Pew Institute, the rate of migration for Mexican workers to the United States, the net ratio, reached 0 in 2010 and 2011. What that means that the name of Mexican workers going up or going north is more or less roughly exactly the same than the name of Mexican workers going south. Why? This is a factor due good and bad reasons. The bad reasons, if you want, is the American recession, more aggressive policy in the border. 15 days ago, the American policeman killed a Mexican father in the border who was just in a picnic with his kids in the Mexican side. Probably 14 people have died this year in more or less that way. Third, of course, some kind of fear against the criminals. But in the good side of the equation is there are more opportunities for Mexican people. We reach universal health coverage, which means a doctor, medicine, treatment, and hospital for any single Mexican in our country. And in order to do that, we built more than 1,200 new hospitals and clinics in 6 years. And refurnished or rebuilt more than 2,000 more. And with that, we are providing health services for the whole population. I told about the new universities. We reached universal education coverage for kids, so in the basic level. And of course, we are creating jobs. Probably we need to pay better those jobs, but the fact is there. So migration reached a zero rate in 2011, 2010, and probably 2012. Now, it is clear for me that this comprehensive immigration reform is absolutely required, and probably this is the window of opportunity to do that. Why? Because there is not such pressure in political field with immigration. We are stopping the Mexican migration, and we can, well, the American Congress should consider that reform. Just leave the people from the shadows, as President Obama says. I do believe in that, and that could be very good for both countries, not only for Mexican workers, but also for American society that demands the services of the Mexican people.
President Calderón, thank you for joining us. Pleasure
Thank
to have
you.
you here. Felipe Calderón.
Thank you very much.
I'll see you soon. Okay?
Thank you.